And I thought, well, it would be really wonderful to see music set to this story that just has, burned in so many people's hearts for so years, and made a difference in their lives. And when Dave and I went to the opening night, Gloria Gaither was there. I'm like, what? And everybody's like, this is so exciting. We went to the rehearsals, and the last rehearsal, and we went to the opening night, and Dave and I were both musicians and both writers, and we were like, this is amazing.
I'm so excited about today's podcast, but I'll warn you, it's a little bit different. I'm interviewing the prolific author, Beverly Lewis. If you've ever read an Amish novel, well, then you know who Beverly Lewis is. She has written hundreds of books, and her name is well known all across America. Now, the reason this podcast is a little bit different is because the quality might sound different to you. We had to record over the phone, and it was just a different experience, but she is so lovely, and I can't wait for you to hear her heart and her voice as she brings this Amish world to life to us. So lean in and listen, my conversation on the Significant Women podcast with author Beverly Lewis. Well, Beverly, hundreds of thousands of women in many countries know your characters very well, but I want to know you today. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you were raised, your faith journey.
Well, I remember opening my heart to Jesus when I was 6 years old. And I felt so light and wonderful afterwards. And I told everyone at school, and I was so thrilled. And it was around that time I started really falling in love with the Bible. My father was a minister, and he was a student of the Greek New Testament. So I would ask him what certain words meant in the Greek. Even at that young age, I was fascinated with words and also the meanings, especially in God's word. Anyway, my encounters with Amish came when I was young. And I remember when we moved to Neffsville in Lancaster County, kind of heart of Amish farmland. I was so taken by the way they dressed, especially the children. They looked identical to their parents, and they were adorable. I remember one time going into town with my father, and I was sitting in the front seat with him, and we had a horse and buggy right in front of us. And Dad would hang back politely, not want to spook the horse, because that can happen. It happens every week. But I could see these three Amish children leaning kind of out a little bit from the back opening, and they were, staring at us. And the older boy, the brother of the one girl, especially, who was really kind of smiling at me, he kind of poked her, and I could see he was trying to keep her in line. I don't know if he thought she was too interested in us Englishers or what. It's just so really, intriguing and fun. And I said to my dad, "Are they afraid of us?" He said, "No, I don't think so." He said, they sell their wares and they go to market, and they're familiar with, non-Amish people. I said, "Why is the little girl staring at me?" He said, "Maybe because you're smiling so much." Anyway, at some point, her older brother really jabbed her with his elbow, and she turned to him and kind of grimaced at him. She wasn't happy with it, but it was kind of my first close-up encounter with the Amish family. And then it wasn't long after that I began to hear stories of my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, who experienced an excommunication from her old order Mennonite community and was eventually shunned. And why was that? She was being courted by a ministerial student with the Christian Missionary Alliance Church.
Oh.
And her father was just devastated. He wanted her to marry the farmer up the road and not a minister outside of their tradition, their old order tradition. Well, my mother and her many sisters, back in the day when they would get together and have family reunions, and there was lots of talking and chatter going on in the kitchen because there were no dishwashers in that house. And they were standing around and talking about my grandmother Ada, and I was about 9 years old when I had started writing stories very secretly and hiding them in the bottom drawer of my dresser. And I was paying a lot of attention to these stories about the heartbreak that had happened to my grandmother Ada, and how she had such bravery and courage to follow the Lord's call in her life and marry this minister, and how they had all these children, 9 children, and my mother's was the next to the youngest. And that really, even at that young age, that really made an impression on me. Of course, by that time, we had lots of Amish friends. Some of my Amish neighbors actually had heard that my father could read the Greek New Testament, and some of them, especially the younger Amish couples, were seekers. Oh. They said quietly they were seekers, and they wanted to know more. So they would invite us to dinner. And I could tell you many stories about all of that. I don't know that I need to really, but it was just a matter of so much interest in the word for coming from the younger couples in the Amish community. And my ears are always listening. I was an observer. I'm introverted, but very quiet observer of people. So when it was time for me to write a story for adults, because I had been writing as a young adult, I began doing a lot more research in the Amish, and actually lived with 2 different Amish families 2 summers. But anyway, this might go into another question you have for me, so maybe I'll just stop there and we can talk about more of that later.
Oh, that's fascinating, Beverly. So when you began writing stories for adults, because I know you started writing more for children or the middle school age, but when you began to write your stories, your books for adults, and your genre became Amish fiction, which prior to you, Beverly, there really weren't many people writing Amish fiction, were there?
There was a man named Joseph W. Yoder who wrote a novel called Rosanna's, let's see, what was it called? It was something about Rosanna, and it was a very interesting story, but it was written like back in the early 1900s.
Oh.
But I think actually I may have popularized Amish fiction more so than actually started it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
I think there were Amish and Mennonites who were writing Rosanna of the Amish. That's the name of the novel.
Right.
And I was really impressed by how so much of what he was saying back in the 1900s, early 1900s, was what I was experiencing as a young adult doing research with Amish families. And I thought, how can they continue to live and dress and embrace the same old traditions and not move forward in the modern world? Well, at that time, they hadn't really done that. But now, of course, some do have cell phones because the women have jobs outside of the home, and they have quilt shops and craft shops, and they work at market, and you can hear them talking in Pennsylvania Dutch very quickly on their, very quickly in a chattery sort of way, and laughing. So I think, okay, these women aren't following their ordinance. It's just cute. But what I was saying is, back when I was doing research in my early 30s, I realized that what Joseph Yoder was writing about in Rosanna of the Amish was still quite similar to what I was experiencing with the Amish. So, yeah, they have embraced what they have been doing with their traditions and their church ordinances for 300 plus years.
Yeah, that is mind-boggling, really, to those of us who live a 21st century life, to realize that they still live a life very similar to their ancestors from 300 years ago. Well, we'll get back to my conversation with Beverly in just a minute, but I wanted to pause and thank you. I know that there are so many other ways you could be spending your time, other podcasts you could be listening to, other blogs you could be reading. And so I just wanted to give you, my listeners, a heartfelt thank you today. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your support. And thank you for your encouragement. As a matter of fact, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me personally, Carol at McLeod Ministries, with a prayer request, with a word of encouragement, maybe how much this podcast has meant to you. Also, if you have someone who might like to be on the podcast, if you know a woman whose story would resonate with the listeners, I'd love to have that information as well. Well, now let me just encourage you. Beverly's movie, The Confession, is coming out on February the 20th. So I hope you'll find a theater near you to see Beverly Lewis's new movie. Now let's get back to my conversation with Beverly. So Beverly, when you begin to write a new book, when you begin to write a new story, does a character come to your mind first? Does a scenario come to your mind? Are you trying to teach a particular lesson? How do you begin the process of a brand new book?
Well, I'm very prayerful about what I've been doing all these years. It's just so integrated in what I do because I've been writing since I was little. Usually I'm writing a book on a deadline prior to the next book. So I don't know who the leading lady will be, but oftentimes the Lord will introduce her to me, or my imagination, but because I'm dedicated to the Lord, I'd like to give him the credit for bringing all of these characters into my mind and my heart eventually. So often there'll be what I say, like a character will sort of introduce herself to me, but I'm supposed to be working on finishing the book before that. And then I'll just say, well, I can't do it now. I can't talk to you now. Sounds very strange. But I basically just write down everything I'm learning about her. And I keep a file, of course, on my computer now. Just knowing, her favorite things and when she was born and what her birth order is and what her greatest desire is. And slowly a storyline will then come out of all that. Or maybe I will have read a news article in Lancaster about something that had happened there. And I think, I wonder if I could build a storyline around it. Although I don't do that very often, I do want all of my plots to be very realistic or could happen. My mother said when I was young, I had a very vivid imagination and a good memory too. So that helped.
Yeah.
And also, of course, all the praying really helps me.
Yes, yes. And now one of your most popular books, The Confession, is being made into a movie. So let's talk about The Confession. Is The Confession based on someone's life, or was she just a new character that introduced herself to you, Katie Lapp?
Katie Lapp actually is loosely based on my grandmother, Ada, because she was the first to introduce me to anything like such a heartache that Katie Lapp would experience. And although my grandmother wasn't adopted, my 3 children are. So there's sort of a clashing of the present versus the past. And we did help our older daughter when she wanted to search for her biological mother. And we were able to help her find her in just a short time. It was a blessing. But so those 2 big themes in my mind came together in, actually The Shunning was first, and the sequel, The Confession, came out of that. And then the other sequel, The Reckoning, came out of The Confession. So those 3 stories were miraculously put together into a script by Martha Bolton, who is an Emmy Award scriptwriter, and she actually wrote for Bob Hope. I don't know if you knew that.
I did, yes.
When I found out about all of this, I thought, wow, I was stunned to think that someone could condense all 3 novels into one stage play. And she did it, and it's really wonderful.
Well, it really is. I have watched it and it is whimsical and sincere and excellent. I fell in love with the characters all over again. Even though I'd read the books, Beverly, I fell in love with them on stage because they came to life. So when you were first approached about allowing your books to become a musical and now a movie, how did you feel?
I was shocked. I mean, I thought, actually, I told my husband, I said, this is so incredible because I've been playing the piano and violin and vocal groups since I was really little. I started piano when I was 4. So my first love was music. And then, like I said, later I started writing stories secretly all those years. I thought, how cool. The 2 things I love so much.
I know.
I couldn't believe it. I was just floored. And I thought, well, it would be really wonderful to see music set to this story that just has, burned in so many people's hearts
Yes.
for so years, and made a difference in their lives. And I was, absolutely over the moon about it. And when Dave and I went to the opening night, Gloria Gaither was there. And I'm like, what? And everybody's like, this is so exciting. We went to the rehearsals and the last rehearsal, and we went to the opening night, and Dave and I were both musicians and both writers, and we were like, this is amazing. And then it was almost addictive. We went to the matinee the next morning, next afternoon, and we went the next night. I think we've seen it 7 or 8 times. It's so good.
Oh.
Yeah, it's remarkably good. It's just,
well, it really
it's
is
so moving and epic, and the music is soaring. I can't really put into words, but after seeing it several times in a row, Dave and I had all the lyrics, a lot of them memorized to some of our favorite songs, like My Heart Has Found a Home.
Yes.
Oh, that was still ringing in my ears and just echoing for days. I love it.
I love that one too.
And the Where You Are trio that Katie sings with her biological mom and her adopted mother. Oh, harmonies just, they send me straight up.
I cried during that song, Beverly. I cried.
Oh,
yeah, it's so touching.
I did too.
So, Beverly, whenever I read a book, I picture the characters to look a certain way, to act a certain way. And then if it's a book that is made into a movie, I think, oh, I didn't picture those people like that. So when you first saw the play or the movie, did your characters look like you had imagined them to look like?
I thought the casting was very excellent. It was right on.
Yeah.
For one thing, Katie Lapp, the girl that plays Katie Lapp, she really has a tender heart just like Katie. And she has also a mixture of this very tender heart, but very determined spirit. She's so much like my grandmother was.
Oh.
It's just sweet, really sweet to me. Dylan Bennett, who is the antagonist, was captured very well by John Schneider, one of the starring actors.
Yes.
And then Shonda Pierce,
who doesn't love Shonda, right?
Oh, she had us all laughing. It was great. I tell you, Rosie the maid, when Katie Lapp goes in search of her birth mother and discovers that she's a well-to-do woman, lives in a mansion in Canandaigua, New York, and she has a maid and a butler, and this maid is she's not shy. She doesn't mince words, which is really very much of a juxtaposition against the way the Amish women are supposed to be. It was just great. I loved it.
I loved it too. I loved the humor that role brought to the musical. She sparkles. That's what it is. She sparkles through it.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So the movie will be in theaters on February the 20th, which we're all so excited about. But Beverly, what's next for you? Are you working on another book, more plays, musicals? What's next for you?
I am looking forward to seeing the final pages, the final chance to see it. My September novel coming out this fall is called The Heirloom.
Mm.
And it is featuring someone that my readers absolutely love. Her name is Ella Mazuk, and she's
Yes.
been called the Wise Woman of Hickory Hollow.
Yes, I know Ella May.
We get to find out what happened during her courtship years. Had she always been wise? What made her so wise? It involves a tragedy, and she observed it, and that's all I'm going to say.
Oh, there have been days in my life, Beverly, when I have thought to myself, oh, I wish I could go have a cup of tea with Ella May. I wonder what she would say about this.
I'm having Ella May's tea right now, actually. It's peppermint. It's raw honey.
Oh, yummy. Oh, well, Beverly, on behalf of a generation of women, let me just thank you for giving your life to the Lord, for giving your imagination to the Lord, and for using your talents for his glory. We have loved getting to know you and reading your characters throughout the years. So my friend, keep writing for the glory of God, and keep telling us wonderful stories.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. It's been an honor to talk with you today. I appreciate that so much.
Oh, I've loved it. You're definitely one of my heroines of the faith. Well, if you've been encouraged by today's podcast, I hope you will go see Beverly Lewis's new movie, The Confession. I hope you'll buy one of her books. And I hope that you'll also share this episode with your family and friends. We love what we do, and we love encouraging our sisters around the world through every means we can. Podcasts, blogs, books, Bible studies. And I just wanted to remind you to download the Carol McLeod Ministries app for your smartphone, because it's a great place to stay in touch with us. You know, we might look at somebody like Beverly Lewis and think, oh, she's one of the significant women of my generation. And yes, she is. But so are you. You have the same Father as Beverly Lewis. You've been created in his image to do remarkable works at your moment in history. So today, I hope that you'll encourage somebody. I hope that you'll pray for somebody. And I certainly hope that you'll love somebody with the love of Jesus. I'll see you next time on the Significant Women Podcast.